Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Seems like I can't give a talk on one of the coasts without a joke about flyover country, but I'll let you get away with it. Anyway, welcome to React.js. And my name is Nick Schrock, and I've been an engineer at Facebook for a little over 7 years. And I was going to thank the organizers, but Brent already took care of that, so I'll go recursive. Thanks, Brent, and thanks for, thanks for thanking the organizers, and thank you, the organizers. This conference is really going to be fantastic, and I know it's going to be fantastic because last year's was awesome. It actually kind of changed the way I really thought about the React.js community. But I think to a lot of you, I'm a new face. I am, as you mentioned, I'm kind of, if anyone outside of Facebook knows me in this room, they probably know me as one of the co-creators of GraphQL. But at Facebook, I've been working at the core of product engineering for a long time. And my job there has essentially been able to build abstractions and frameworks for other product engineers. So I've been working in PHP and Hack during the beginning of my career. And then I also have done projects in the iOS and the Android code bases. But I have a confession to make. I don't actually code that much JavaScript. So when Christopher asked me to do this keynote, I was like, are you sure? Maybe someone should be up here that does stuff? I don't code that much JavaScript. So you might be asking the question, what do you do here, huh? What's this guy doing up here? And the answer really, I forgot this part. It could have been any number of people. Michael, Christopher, James, Sebastian. Here's more people that actually do stuff. Jing, Ryan, Dan Maberoff, Pete Hunt. And I think the answer really is that React is much more than a JS library, right? Now, it is a JS library, and it's fantastic, and originally started to build websites, and it does that extremely well. And it's a super important problem. But React is becoming an entire ecosystem of technology. I think as you're watching this develop between React, React Native, Flux, Relay, GraphQL, Nuclide, Flow, this is really turning into a cohesive ecosystem that can really fundamentally advance web and mobile development. But as I was saying before, what is the state of, React.js is incredibly important. And a lot of you, we're all in this room because we believe in it. And so you're going to hear after me from Ben Alpert about all the stuff we're doing in the core library, and it's super, super important. There's still a lot of work to do. And he's going to talk about how we're going to address gaps in tooling and also address issues such as JavaScript fatigue. But I want to step back and really take stock of where we're at with React.js. And I think all of us at Facebook who were originally with the project are really stunned at the breadth, the depth, and what I like to call the fervor of adoption. So let's get into that. What do I mean by breadth? So I'm not a big believer in talking about GitHub stars as a metric. We all love to do that a lot. But I prefer this. I think this is remarkable. The React Developer Toolkit, the plugin for Chrome, has nearly 250,000 installed. This is for a JavaScript framework that you need to debug or inspect or whatever. This is nuts. To give you context on that, Google Analytics, which is one of the foundational technologies of the internet that's been around for over a decade, only has about 10 to 20%, well, 20%, I can do math, 20% more installs than React. I think that's stunning in under 3 years. Let's talk about depth. So it's not like just hobbyists and prototypers, even though we love hobbyists and prototypers, are using this. Companies, big and small, startups, household names, sports companies, media companies, technology companies are all betting on React in a huge way. I don't know how fast adoption has worked in the past, but that seems incredible to me. Under 3 years. And then, what do I mean by fervor? Well, I think you can feel the passion about this framework when you go to conferences and meetups such as this. And I like to joke around to people outside the community that it almost feels like a quasi-religious event. And, and we've really taken it to the next level at the office. Actually, someone made a stained glass window with the React logo. And so, literally, we can have a temple to React in the office. This is maybe even more of my favorite thing. So this is a picture of the CTO, Mike Schrock. Great guy. And he says, he told us internally, when I speak internally, the one thing most people want to talk to me about is React. Now, you might not find that remarkable, because we're all super fired up about React. But this is the man that Oculus reports to, that the AI lab reports to, as well as the organization that literally builds drones that fly for months on end, beaming lasers to each other to deliver internet all over the globe. But everyone wants to talk to him about some JavaScript. I think that's pretty awesome. All right, so React.js has been spectacularly successful as a JavaScript framework. But last year, we made a huge announcement. Before last year's conference at React.js, React was a library for building web UIs. Super important problem, that's how we got started in this. But we announced React Native. And React changed the React project, or React Native changed the React project from a JavaScript framework to building UIs to an entire cohesive web mobile development system. Right? So we can build React.js apps over iOS, over Android, and potentially any other proprietary platform. This is an enormous shift. And a common reaction I've heard is, I've heard this story before of cross-platform mobile platforms. It's kind of a weird way of putting that. But I've heard this story before. And why is it different this time? And we fundamentally believe that. And I actually get a little frustrated when people tell me that, because I feel it's a little defeatist, but I understand it. I understand the engineer's skepticism over this. And there's this kind of truism, right? Ideas don't work before they work. And that might sound stupid, but it happens also to be true. You know, Google was not the first search engine. It was about the 22nd search engine or something. And a lot of you might be a little young to remember this, but there were actually search engines before Google with all these ridiculous names, and none of them worked. My favorite was Ask Jeeves. I think because I'm an Anglophile, the whole notion of a butler showing you the internet's pretty cute. But the thing is, Google was the first awesome search engine. And so just because ideas don't work before doesn't mean they're not going to work in the future. So kind of when do these ideas come to fruition and actually execute in the market? And I think there's three elements to that. Taste, does it really fit with the people who want to use it? And I would say by the fervor, we're on target for that. Timing, is the market ready for it? Is kind of the world that you're operating ready for this idea? And last, technology. Have you made the right technology decisions to execute on your vision? And we really think we have that with React. So like I said, React Native, and most of this rest of the talk is going to be about React Native. React Native has React, which I think really is an extraordinarily tasteful framework that just aligns to the way developers think. Developers love this thing. Mobile devices are ready for a framework like this. I'll get into why that is. And they've changed a lot over the last 5 years when a lot of these other systems were tried. And we're also building what I like to call a horizontal platform. We have made different technology decisions than others in the past. So let's start. React makes React Native different. And if you've been to one of these conferences and these overviews, you've heard a lot of these buzzwords before. Immutable data, functional programming, declarative APIs, and the virtual DOM. Now, I'm not going to go into all that and try to explain why we think it kind of, in a kind of a deep philosophical way, aligns to the way that computation works right now in the world that we live in. But you can kind of feel it when you use the framework, because you just have this kind of calm, zen-like, and everything makes sense. Just a massive advance. But what I do want to prove to you, or attempt to prove, is by example, that these concepts are universal, actually, and they are already working in native development. So how I'm going to do that is actually talk about an iOS framework. And it's an iOS framework called Component Kit. So Component Kit is a UI framework written in Objective-C for iOS that adopts similar principles to React to build UIs. And when you ask Adam Ernst, who's an incredibly talented iOS engineer, who's the primary author of this, you're like, hey, Adam, what were your design parameters and trade-offs? And you ask him a fancy engineering question, and the response is simple. I stole this shamelessly from React. So, a trigger warning to all the JavaScript devs out there. You're about to look at some Objective-C. I know. All right, so this is a component kit function. It returns a bunch of stuff, but it has all these crazy sigils and insane names. And yeah, that's how I'm feeling about that. But if we start changing things, so we rename stuff to look like React Native, and then we change some symbols, all we did was change some sigils in there, made it look like some JavaScript, added some JSX, and then we reformat, and we literally have a React function. It is the same system ported to iOS. It has the same principles. It constructs essentially an iOS equivalent of a virtual DOM. It all works the same way, and it's working now. This powers our news feed. And when we change to it, it's like 4x less code, and all the developers are in complete adulation, and there's less bugs, and it's a very familiar story of adoption here. And this is really, I think, a differentiator in what I mean by taste. React has opinions. React has values about the way that software should be structured. And by building the runtime around that, it's really a competitive advantage and will drive adoption. And then there's JavaScript. So we view JavaScript as a competitive advantage. And there's this famous quote by Mark Twain, who's one of the greatest witnesses ever, and he says, "Reports of my death are greatly exaggerated." Well, I think a few other things can make this quote as well. One is the desktop. The death of the desktop is greatly exaggerated. And actually, I think the person that best captured that and illustrated that is actually Steve Jobs. He makes this great analogy for PCs and laptops. PCs are like trucks. And what he meant by that is that originally, when they first made cars, all cars were trucks. And then they came out with this little car that most consumers liked way better. But there are still trucks on the road, they're like 10, 20% of cars or whatever, and they're extremely important to society. Just like desktops. There are certain tasks and tools that mobile devices will probably never be good for, at least for the foreseeable future. And these tools are incredibly important, incredibly complex. In the same fashion, the web is not going anywhere. The death of the web is also greatly exaggerated. The web is an incredibly important technology. It will drive desktop tools and applications for the foreseeable future, and mobile web is still really important. It is part of our ecosystem. So JavaScript is going nowhere. JavaScript is an awesome language, and it's rapidly evolving. For someone who's kind of hopping in and out of JavaScript, who went pre-ES6, and then you hop in and go post-ES6, like, oh my God, what the hell happened? This language is awesome now. I have to write bind and the Lambda syntax and all the rest of it. And then, we're really, JavaScript is really pushing into the future. One of my favorites is the async await that's coming, hopefully, in the next standard. Whoop, here we go. Because, we have a similar construct in PHP, or Hack, pardon me, and if you've programmed in this and had to do asynchronous programming, which is obviously critical for UIs, it is just incredibly liberating. And Facebook, at least internally, well, what does that mean at least? Facebook, period, is investing in JavaScript heavily. So we're committed to supporting and contributing to Babel, which is obviously our source-to-source transform. Flow, which is our type annotation layer to adding code intelligence. It's a really powerful gradual typing system for JavaScript. And also Nuclide, which is our IDE that's targeted towards kind of assembling all these technology to one cohesive developer experience. So what do I mean by the state of mobile devices? Well, an interesting thing has happened in the last 5 years in that iOS has been dual core since 2011. And Android is even more multi-core. If you have an Android device in the audience, it probably has 4 cores or more. And what's interesting about, so kind of the fact you can assume is that multi-core is becoming universal. And what's awesome about React, and the original designers were very prescient about this, is that the React native architecture is uniquely suited for the multi-core world. Because whenever you code a React application, the product developer doesn't have to think about parallelism, but there is a ton of implicit parallelism in the system. And that stems from the values of React. Declarative APIs, the immutable data structures, which are inherently thread safe, and on and on and on. You know, and if you think about it, you can like extract this just from a very basic architecture diagram. Every single React native application has the UI main thread, both on Android and iOS, which is where all the manipulation of platform-specific views happen, scrolling, touch events, things of that nature. Then we have a JS thread, where all the user space JS code is written. And then we have a separate thread for computing layout, using Flexbox. You know, just kind of the hello world of React Native already has implicit parallelism built in that we can take advantage of. You have to do a lot more work in native, given the current state of native, to take advantage of multi-core. So another thing, and you've heard this before, I assume, is that we are not a write once, run anywhere platform. And I want to dig into why that is true. And the reason why that is true is that proprietary, whoa, over there, new light, React Native club life over there, all right. The proprietary platforms that we build on will always and forever differentiate and compete, right? Android, iOS, Windows Mobile, and all the rest of them are competing viciously for market share and users. That means they're going to build different stuff. And if you want to deliver native experiences, you need to not have write once, run anywhere, right? You're going to need to write platform-specific code. And so we kind of coined this phrase, learn once, write anywhere, but I actually don't think that captured the subtlety of what we're doing. And the word we're choosing is the horizontal platform. So what does that mean? Well, back to our diagram, you can think of React Native as this thin layer over, or relatively thin layer, at least relative to the OSs, over these proprietary OSs. And you know, we're not seeking to re-implement an entire OS. We're seeking to take advantage of those proprietary capabilities and overlay common tools, abstractions, and concepts. So with the horizontal platform, you share when possible and go native when necessary. So what do you share? Well, like I said, you can share APIs. There's a ton of common APIs in React Native, tools and languages, JavaScript, the React Chrome Developer Toolkit, et cetera. And it turns out you can actually share a hell of a lot of code. Not all of it, but a ton of it. And that unlocks enormous power. Now, when do you have to go native? Well, you have to go native to use the proprietary capabilities of the underlying OS. Sometimes you need to go to native for compute-intensive tasks that C++ can execute faster, or other native languages. And I think this is an incredibly important and subtle point, especially as larger software systems adopt React Native, is that you can preserve your existing investments that you've built in native code that are already working. Any software architecture that proposes that you have to do all at once rewrite all at the same time has a much higher barrier, much higher activation energy. You know, and just sometimes you have to get close to the metal. Now, this is one of my favorite tweets of all time. You know, in this room, like, you know, maybe, oh, we got to drop into Node to get close to the metal, right? Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. It's so good. You know, the reason why is that all abstractions leak. This is a fundamental rule of computer science, kind of, especially abstractions with a wide surface area like this. You know, in React Native, if you're going to be developing on iOS or Android, the implementation details of the OSs will undoubtedly leak up. Different performance problems, different bugs, et cetera. So you have to acknowledge this reality, even emotionally, and accept it. And well-designed abstractions account for this. They allow you to break abstraction in structured ways and have it be contained. And this is one of the key elements of well-designed systems, in my view, that ensures that they bend, but they don't break. You know, a lot of these previous systems have been too rigid in the way that they enforce and don't let you drop down into Node. So how is this actually working? So we've built this Ads Manager app that we've shipped on both iOS and Android. And it feels native. They share 85 to 90% of the code. Okay? That's crazy. And they were built by a single team, single PM, same team of engineers. Okay, if you're in software engineering management or product management and you're not like physically shaking, I don't think you understand the information that was just communicated to you. Yeah, if you're not impressed by this, I literally give up. So what's next for React? So, I hate to disappoint some of you, but we do not have an announcement on the scale of React Native this year. I apologize. We laid out an ambitious and huge vision last year, and it's going to take a long time to execute on it, both you and us together. So essentially, in summary, we have 3 priorities in 2016. First priority is execution. The second priority is execution. And the third priority is execution. We are relentlessly executing on this vision. And there's kind of like this common Silicon Valley cliche that ideas are easy and execution is everything. And the frustrating things about cliches is that they're more than often true. This is one of them that's true. It's much harder to assemble a team and define that timing and taste and technology to make something work properly. And that's what we've been doing this entire year. So React Native on Android was released this year. We are releasing production apps on React Native, both the Ads Manager that I previously mentioned, as well as our Groups app, which is largely built on React Native. They are both on iOS and Android. We are expanding the ecosystem around React Native, both with libraries like Relay and GraphQL, which embodies similar concepts to React Native on the server side. We are using React Native in the Facebook main application. We released this thing called the Friends Day video, where you get to make it's actually a fairly complicated UI, and you get to make a video for your friends, and like butterflies fly in and whatever. But this feature was also built by one team, shipped on iOS and Android on React Native. And we are also beginning to move permanent features in the app to React Native. We are in the process of rolling out the events dashboard, which is actually a very highly used UI element or feature in our app. That will be React Native before you know it. And then we are working on improving the runtime. We are doing it relentlessly. You're going to hear a talk from Tadu about the performance work that's happening. There is a ton of work, and if you kind of follow the repo and watch the upstreams happen, it is a relentless pounding to improve performance. Performance is one of those things that's just one foot in front of the other, because it's a lot of hard work, and there's generally no easy wins once the low-hanging fruit is gone. And they've done a ton of impressive work. React Native adoption within Facebook engineering is accelerating. In 2006, our goal is to move React Native into the very heart of the Facebook consumer experience. And that means we will just be investing more and more and more into React Native and open sourcing more and more and more improvements. And that's good for all of us. We want to get the same dynamic that we have in React of the self-sustaining community. But someone has to lead the way. And we're going to make it so it can ship in the most used app in the world. Lastly, I want to talk about what React Native means to the industry. So if we're successful, we are really on the cusp of redefining mobile development. And we are in the midst of this mobile revolution. It's the biggest shift in consumer technology probably since the internet or the web. And you have billions of people around the world with these supercomputers in their pocket that can connect to social, communication, and economic networks. It's crazy how much these things are redefining these parts of our lives. And so it's been a giant leap forward for consumers. But because the consumers, for their high-use apps, have demanded native experiences, it's actually been a huge step backwards for developers and product organizations. So just put this in historical context. We started with desktop development. And with desktop development, you were developing on proprietary platforms like Windows, Mac, Solaris, and others. You had installed binaries. So if you shipped a bug, it would exist in the field for years. And that made you much more cautious. It slowed down development times. And then let's talk about compile cycles. In any native code base of large size, I don't know, how many of you have worked in like a large C++ or Java? God, you are all so lucky. I mean, it is awful. It is literally awful. You like press compile and you wait 10 minutes, you're like, question your career choices. And then you have to build these organizations that have platform-aware teams, meaning platform is an input into how you organize yourselves. So then you have like 2 different teams for different platforms. You have to spend all this time with communication overhead to make sure everyone likes each other and that you have the same product roadmap and all this stuff. And it's a huge pain. Really slows down the entire development process. Web was not just a revolution for the consumer, and it was. But web was also a revolution for the way that software organizations operate. Instead of these proprietary standards, you had open standards. That means you had a better ecosystem of tools. You didn't have vendor lock-in. You had instant distribution, which is so empowering for organizations. You can fix bugs instantly, you can experiment, you can improve things much, much more quickly. Continuous deployment, all this stuff. Fast iteration. Now, when you're developing, you get this flow, right? You guys know what I'm talking about, and it's so much better than waiting for a compile cycle. And then you can fundamentally organize your companies differently while delivering to more and more users. You can have a single product team, a single PM or person delivering features. You can synchronize your features, your launch schedule. It completely changes the operational rhythm of the company. Moving from web to native was effectively like being ripped back in time. And like not in like a really fun way. It's like you're going back to some time that wasn't good. And really the React Native opportunity is our opportunity to get us back to the future. And it truly is symmetrical. From native, you're going to proprietary platforms to open standards in React Native or open source. Maybe it has to be formalized later. You're going from installed binaries to instant distribution potentially. With systems like Code Push or Exponent, these other people that are working on this. You're going from compile cycles to fast iteration. You're going from platform-aware teams to unified teams, okay? It's amazing. React Native can transform product organizations. It's not just your experience in front of the computer, right? This is a big deal. Lastly, I just kind of want to put all of Facebook's effort in context. I've been talking about the ecosystem and all these related technologies. And we like to say that the whole of these is greater than the sum of their parts. Each of these projects, React Native, React, Flow, GraphQL, et cetera, are all useful in your own right. You can integrate them into systems. But together, they actually fit together. They're all aligned philosophically. GraphQL is another horizontal platform. I kind of liken it to React Native in a way on the server. And what I mean by that is that it's this thin layer of an open standard that can be implemented in any language, which is particular to the needs of your application, and also any backend, right? So it's kind of like 2 horizontal platforms stacked on top of each other. And if you go all in on this philosophy, the results can be incredible, right? That's the power of Relay. It is a coupling of React to GraphQL, and if you really fully buy into this, it's just this amazing product experience. You have the queries co-located with the views, and it's amazing. I wish I had more time to actually explain what these are, but 30 minutes is 30 minutes. And then you have systems like Flux and Redux, right? The EG section could go on for about 30 slides, I think, right? But these are other systems and philosophies which totally just fit in, right? They all click. They all fit together. And so, as we move forward and mature this ecosystem, like I said before, I really do think we're on the cusp of completely redefining what it means to develop mobile applications. And while we're doing that, because of the way this is all structured with components that fit together, it doesn't mean you have to abandon the previous stuff. By improving React Native, you're improving React.js and vice versa, right? This is an amazing journey we're all going to be on. And so without further ado, I want to pass it on to Ben Alpert, who's going to talk about the developments that have happened in the React.js library. And I'm really excited for this, and thank you for having me.